for more than half of my life, Scotland has been governed by parties that we didn't elect at Westminster. And these parties have given us from everything from the poll tax to the bedroom tax. And they are the same people who, through Project Fear, are telling us that this country can't run our own affairs. My case this evening is simple. No one, absolutely no one, will do a better job of running Scotland than the people who live and work in Scotland. On the 18th of September, we have the opportunity of a lifetime. We should seize it with both hands.
All of us who live here are proud of Scotland. Of course we are. I want Scotland to prosper. We all do. But it is not our patriotism that is at stake tonight. Rather, it's something bigger than that, and that's the future of our country, the future for our children and our grandchildren. And it isn't just for politicians, it's for all of us. And you know, there are times that for the love of our family and the love of our country, it's sometimes best to say no. Not because we can't, but simply because it is not the best thing to do. Now, in 6 weeks' time, we will make the biggest decision that we've ever made here in Scotland. And remember this, if we decide to leave, there is no going back. There's no second chance.
One thing we can say with absolute certainty, when Scotland becomes independent, then in every single election we'll get the government that Scotland votes for. We can say that with absolute certainty. Every time Scotland goes into a general election, we have the risk of having people we didn't vote for ruling over us.
When it comes to getting government you didn't vote for, I didn't vote for him, but I'm stuck with him. I just accept that's what happens in a democracy.
If there's a no vote, we have had this declaration today from the leaders of the UK parties. There will definitely be more powers accruing to Scotland. Give me two powers that will definitely accrue.
Both tax and increased power over
Which
housing
tax?
benefit, over income tax.
All of it?
Income tax, the power
All of it?
There's two things happening. There is power already coming, where you've got power on income tax, and on top of that, they will have additional power to vary the rate of income tax. So yes, there are substantial powers, responsibility over nearly 40% of what the Scottish Government spends. And I think that is a major step forward. But as I say, it maintains the fact we have a Scottish Parliament, but we also have the advantages, the opportunities and securities that come from being part of the United Kingdom, and we don't take on a whole bunch of risks. A currency union only works if you've got a political union, which is what we've got today.
Oh.
Now, look, any 8-year-old can tell you the flag of the country, the capital of a country, and its currency. Now, I presume the flag's the Saltire. I assume our capital will still be Edinburgh. But you can't tell us what currency we'll have. What's an 8-year going to make of that?
Alistair, we'll keep the pound because it belongs to Scotland as much as it belongs to England. It's our pound as well as your pound. Even Gordon Brown has said that the George Osborne coming up to Scotland and saying you shall not have the pound is counterproductive for your campaign. So why can't we go back to the Alistair Darling of last year saying it was logical and desirable in the interests of Scotland and in the interests of the rest of the United Kingdom to keep the pound after independence? Logical and desirable.
This reminds me of when you said you had legal advice that said we'd automatically get back into the European Union and it didn't exist. You're not doing yourself any favours. Let's see if we can go at it through a process of elimination. Earlier this year, on the television, you said you had a range of options if you didn't get the currency union. When you were pressed about it, you said you had options B, C, D and E. What is option B? Please tell us.
Well, I pointed out in that interview we have a Fiscal Commission report which on page 4 sets out a range of options for Scotland. I'm sure you've read it. The Fiscal Commission has a range of prominent economists, a couple of Nobel laureates, but I want what's best for Scotland. What's best for Scotland is keeping the pound sterling. We should keep the pound sterling because it's good for Scotland and good for the rest of the United Kingdom.
Both of us want the country to stay in the European Union. Isn't it important that we discuss actually the practicalities of it? It is quite clear that Scotland would have to reapply. It is not at all clear what the terms and conditions are that we'd have to meet. I know from my experience in negotiating in the European Union, even when everybody's agreed, any one of the 28 member states can veto anything they want, and it doesn't have to be about Scotland. We ought to be discussing these issues because they are critical to Scotland's future. Never mind about websites and candors and driving on the wrong side of the road.
If we both want to be in the European Union, then why is your ally in the campaign the Foreign Secretary who says he'll vote to take the UK out of the European Union? Why are your allies in the No campaign saying that? Even your partner in the No campaign, David Cameron, has said supporters of independence will always be able to cite examples of small, independent, thriving economies across Europe. It would be wrong to suggest that Scotland could not be another such successful independent country. Do you agree with David Cameron on that?
But the small countries do have to make sure that they balance the books.
Everybody has to balance the books.
In your own figures, we would have a much bigger deficit at the time you want independence than the rest of the UK, and that would mean some very difficult decisions which you are not prepared to face up with.
Do you agree with David Cameron or not?
Come on,
Mr. Salmond.
Do you agree with David Cameron or not?
I was just going to make another point about small...
Do you agree with David Cameron or not?
Let me answer your question. Well, let me answer your question.
Do you agree
the other
with
thing about small countries...
Let's listen to the answer.
As the other point about small countries, as
No,
Professor David Bell was making at the weekend, is they tend to have higher prices in the shops than we do.
Do you
when
agree?
you look at the pressures we face on our public spending, I think the risks of independence are frankly not worth taking.
Let's do it. Question and answer. Question, Mr. Salmond.
I feel like Jeremy Paxman and Michael Howard here. Do you agree with David Cameron or not?
Well, you're more like Michael Howard than you are Jeremy Paxman.
Do you agree with David Cameron or not?
If you are going to enter into a currency union, two sets of people, the rest of the UK and Scotland, would have to agree the terms and conditions of a currency union. And one of the things you'll be asking the rest of the UK to do is to underwrite a Scottish banking system that is 12 times the size of Scotland's wealth. In Cyprus, it was only 8 times as large. And all I'm saying to you is that there's no law, no constitution, no sovereignty that can compel two people to agree.
Can I just say why that... the figure that he just cited is a Treasury figure which assumed all the capital assets of the Royal Bank of Scotland, the markets division, that are allocated to Scotland. Not a single person in that group works in Scotland, in the markets division of the Royal Bank of Scotland. They've never worked anywhere else but London. That is why the Royal Bank of Scotland has more employees in London than it does in Scotland. Yes, and it's why listen, Alistair, it's not a great point to make because you were in charge of financial regulation when the banks went bust. That is the point.
Of course I was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and of course I had to deal with it. Of course I have responsibility for every single thing I did during the time I was Chancellor, including stopping the banking system from collapsing, partly because
did you contribute to austerity?
Of course, when you had a banking crisis, it then led to an economic crisis, and any government, no matter how large, how small, would have to deal with that. If Scotland had been independent at the time, it would have been exactly the same position as Ireland and Iceland. Remember the Ark of Prosperity? Both of those countries are bust now because they couldn't deal with the banking crisis. Oil is a great thing, since you asked earlier. It's been a great boon. It will be in the future. But to base all our prospects on a declining source of income doesn't seem to me to make any sense.
Every single former Chancellor of the Exchequer now says that they wish they'd set up an oil fund. They should have done so. Alistair didn't when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer. I say when Scotland controls these resources, we should set up a fund for Scotland and for future generations.